Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here giving you a fight preview for Joyce versus Zhang. And of course, before we get into my initial thoughts here, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section about this one. I think it's a pretty interesting heavyweight clash, a little bit under the radar as most fights that don't include Usyk or Fury are at this point, but would love to hear your thoughts, picks, all that good stuff down in the comments section below. Would love to hear it all. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate when you guys do that. Definitely helps out the channel. Love if you guys went ahead and did that right now. And be sure to hit that notification bell as well. A little bit of fight info here. We have Joyce taking on Zhang. This will be at the COPPERBOX Arena in London, England, airing on BT Sport across the pond. Don't know about the channel here in the United States thus far. Are in the heavyweight division with no title on the line. Now, in terms of my initial thoughts, what kind of came to mind first of all was kind of looking at the odds. That's kind of how my mind is wired. But when I looked at them, which I'll get into it a little bit, I really realized that this fight is a lot, in my mind, closer than a lot of people might expect. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I think Zhang has a really good chance of at the very least looking semi-impressive in this fight and potentially causing an upset. Do I think he does it? Not necessarily, and of course you can check in the description box for my prediction for this fight as well, but having said that, I do think he has a chance of at the very least putting forth a decent effort in this fight. Ultimately, what will come to mind here in this fight, or really what we'll question, is if Zhang has enough power to really penetrate seemingly impenetrable defense of Joyce. And by Joyce, I mean in defense, I don't mean so much skill, but just his ability to absorb a shot. In some sense, that is his defense, that he knows he can take those punches and more or less walk through them. Will the Chinese fighter give him something in terms of onslaught or in terms of an offense that will at least make him question that, maybe back up and kind of add some wrinkles to his game if he's to be successful, him being Joyce in this case? Which of course led me to my second thought is, why are the odds so wide? And I think the only real reason that you can kind of come to that conclusion is because of age. Not to be an ageist here or anything like that, but Zhang is old. He's an older fighter, an inactive fighter, which can definitely age a fighter on top of father time. He's an older fighter, and because of illness and other ailments and just other issues, he's been less active than he'd like to be. Sat on the shelf for decent stretches of time because of these sort of circumstances, and it just isn't good for a fighter. Now, the one benefit that he might have, of course, he's a heavyweight fighter. They do tend to age a little less aggressively, shall we call it, than some of the smaller weight fighters do. So that might give him some chance there. But that really is the only reason, in my opinion, you can have the odds so wide. And of course, if you want to know more about the odds, of course, to this fight, you can check out my prediction for this fight in the description box below. But the point being, I think the only reason that you could really come to that conclusion is age. Because outside of that, when you look at just skill, you look at their abilities, Zhang is a very capable heavyweight who one could argue should be undefeated, who has more or less looked impressive in most of his fights, again, with the exception of one or two here where he was going through some health issues. At this point, you have him kind of taking control of his life a little bit more, getting into better shape, putting forth some decent efforts. You know, he has the one loss to Filip Hrgović, but quite frankly, I think he won that fight, and at the very least looked pretty impressive in that fight. If he can put forth that sort of effort, or that sort of offense in this fight, it's at least going to be an interesting one, whether or not Joyce wins or not. I think because of, a little bit of an age advantage for Joyce, he always has to be the betting favorite here. He is unbeaten. He has a great chin, decent power. Slow as all hell, of course, but nonetheless decent in all other ways. You have to kind of give him the odds tilting in his favor, but how wide they are is pretty interesting to me, to say the very least. Now, for the winner, for Joyce, it helps build to that next fight. Again, you don't want to say that Zhang is that kind of step-over opponent or just stay busy, but that is effectively what he will serve as if this fight goes according to the plan of Joyce and his team. This is a fight that gets him out there and kind of helps him build his resume in boxing, and to be quite frank, it's a very, very decent resume when you look at it. In a relatively short period of time, he's remained unbeaten, looked more and more impressive as the fights have gotten seemingly harder, stopped Dubois, stopped a former titleist in Joseph Parker, and now if he knocks off Zhang, that's a decent resume compiled for a fighter who, again, in a heavyweight division that kind of is both talented but also wide open. You're in a decent position if Joyce can get through this, and you're in a more marketable position if you get rid of him in comfortable fashion and push towards those bigger fights with a guy like Usyk, with a guy like Tyson Fury, especially in the UK. For Zhang, it breathes life into your career. Again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but you are older. You've been inactive at times, and you have a loss, the Hrgovic loss as mentioned before, and this will help erase some of that. If you lose, it kind of looks like, well, he's been inactive, he's older, he has the loss, and this just cements that the writing was sort of on the wall with all of those kind of coincidences becoming more correlated. They're going to look more like an actual truth about you as a fighter. On the other hand, if you win, it helps erase it. Now it's like, well, you got robbed in that fight. The inactivity actually didn't hurt you. It might have helped you. Even though you're older, you're more experienced. It becomes positive things that you can take forth in your career. A win is very important to the Chinese fighting man. If he can actually pull this one off, especially against the odds, at the very least, he has another big fight and a potential rematch, and then all the other possibilities that might be out there for him as well. So he certainly has a lot to fight for in this contest. I would also say for Zhang, he has kind of an untapped potential in the sense that if he can win this fight and get through this kind of feud he might have with Joyce in terms of their feud in the ring, what kind of draw he would be in China. Because again, if he becomes the star that he hopes to become, I'm sure, in this fight, or by winning this fight rather, he certainly could host a couple of big fights over there, and it would be just a very good spectacle for the sport to have it continue to grow in countries where traditionally it might not be the biggest sport. And for the loser, if it's Joyce, it's a giant setback. You have to call it what it is. When you're as favored as he is in this fight, when you're expected to continue to roll, you're in a tough position if you lose. You go into a rematch, best case scenario, waste more time having to try and get to that rematch, ultimately win that rematch, but you're also not young yourself. And so you'll still have to kind of erase that loss from your resume, so to speak. Takes a lot of luster off of the potential UK showdowns you have for you as well. Worst case scenario, you lose a potential rematch and now you're in real trouble. So it's certainly something, of course, you're looking to avoid. You're always looking to avoid a loss, but especially when you're primed and ready for that next big step in your career. For Zhang, might just be about the end of the line, unfortunately. Back-to-back losses, again, older fighter, he said, repeating himself, might just be about it. You don't want to be so finite with a person's career, but you just have so many things building up that it just doesn't look great for you. If I described Zhang, if he loses, as a fighter, a guy with back-to-back losses against the only real solid professionals that he's faced at the age he's at, which I believe is nearing 40, if not 40, you wouldn't look at that and say, yeah, I'd love to be him. You'd look at that and say, yeah, might be time to start worrying about those investments or whatever you have outside of boxing going forward, because it's just not a perfect position for a fighter. That having been said, for either guy, heavyweight always has names, up-and-coming fighters looking for that old-timer to build off of. Not a great spot to be in, of course, but at the very least, it perhaps provides you opportunities after this fight to continue your career, and at the very least, leave the sport with a couple of paydays. And in terms of what to expect, I think it should be pretty hard-hitting. I think you're going to see a lot of really good, solid, concussive blows. Not great for the fighters, of course, but it is heavyweight boxing, and unfortunately, to some degree, that's just the name of the game, unfortunately. I think it will be a pretty hard-fought battle for as long as it lasts. Could be over in a couple rounds, it's heavyweight boxing, but I do expect it to go a little bit longer. Ultimately, spoiler alert, I do think Joyce wins, but I give Zhang a better chance than a lot do, and I think that's primarily because he has the faster hands, he's pretty accurate for a big guy, and he can take a pretty decent punch himself. So if he can get going early, I think he has a really decent shot, and at the very least will keep this fight interesting and kind of going until we get to that kind of conclusion, whatever it might be. And of course, in terms of my prediction for the call out after the fight, I do think that, again, Joyce wins. And if he wins, I'm pretty positive we all know what's going to be there. It's pretty obvious. It's the Tyson Fury fight. It's the biggest fight. It's a domestic fight that has world level implications, especially now that Tyson Fury has unfortunately freed himself up because the Usyk fight isn't there. Usyk's already dealing with a lot of mandatory issues to begin with. Joyce, I think, would like to take on that position of fighting Fury because it is the biggest fight, the biggest money, perhaps the best name in the division anyway. Certainly the call out that I expect if he is victorious on the night. But in the event, let me know what you guys think. Want to know your views on this one. What do you have as a prediction for this fight? What do you have kind of as an initial thought going into this fight? What interests you? All that good stuff. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out my prediction for this contest between Joyce and Zhang in the description box below. And check out junboxing.com for news, rankings, schedule, results, betting odds, all of that good stuff. And as always, until next time.